Davis. I'm the artistic director of Burning Coal Theater Company, and we're doing a special series this year with our 27th season in Raleigh, where we're talking to one of the artists involved in each of the 4 main stage productions this year. And we're starting off with ARCADIA by Tom Stoppard and Ian Finley, who many of you probably watching this know. Ian was our education director for 8 years. He went to teach and spent more than a decade, I think, teaching at Research Triangle High School, and is now working in the nonprofit sector in the technology.
Doing mobile app design.
Is it something you'd want to mention, the name of the company?
It's the Live, Learn, Innovate Foundation, the Best Life app, that sort of thing. So very different from teaching in that way, but it's actually fairly similar to my character in ARCADIA. You know, there's this beautiful speech about algorithms, which I'm actually working on every day in my real job.
Very nice. Well, let's just dive right in and talk about ARCADIA. There's no beating around the bush with this play.
Although there are bushes in the play.
Many bushes. One has to jump in head first on this one, I think, because it's such a multi-leveled work of art. I'd love to know when you first came across ARCADIA. How did you experience it?
Sure. So I had my voice teacher in undergrad, Sarah Shipabottom, one of the best teachers I've ever had in my life. I still use the stuff that she taught me to this day. And she introduced me to several of my favorite pieces, and she introduced me to ARCADIA. And immediately I read it my junior year of undergrad and fell immediately in love. It has been my favorite play ever since. And it is one of those, that was a very long time ago, but it is one of those plays that every time I come back to it, I read it over again, probably every couple of years. And like any great work of art, it gets better each time you come back to it. It becomes, in fact, a new thing. There's so much, it's like Hamlet, in that every time you read it, it's not just better, it's a new play.
You can go down different roads.
Yes, exactly.
What you focus on each time. I think that's right. Was that your first stopper?
No, I have a twin brother, and I had done Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead with my twin brother our senior year in high school.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. It was, we directed it and we played Rosencrantz. I'm almost certain I was Rosencrantz. I may have been Guildenstern, but it's that was like our primary memory from high school was doing that together. That's a big play as well.
Sure. Oh yeah. His first full-length play, I think. And have you seen ARCADIA? Have you seen the production?
So in New York, you know this very, very well. Lincoln Center, there is this fantastic place where you can go and you can sit in little curls and watch videos of shows that have been on Broadway over the last, 50, 70 years or so. Right. And they had the original Lincoln Center production with, I think, Blair Brown and Victor Garber and Robert Sean Leonard there. So I spent an afternoon sitting in one of those little library booths watching that and crying my eyes out.
Yeah, it was a devastating production. I saw that production.
Oh wow!
I actually saw that when I did not see it in London. I had not yet begun to travel really much in my life, but I was still living in New York. I think it played there in '93 or '94. It opened originally in '93, so it might have been '94 or '95. But I was still in New York, and I saw that production and remember just the sense of being overwhelmed by his ability to hold all those different ideas and to bring them together so clearly. But you haven't actually seen a live production?
No, I haven't.
That's interesting.
I've wanted to, but it's not a play that gets done a lot for various different reasons. It's a challenge, right? And it's a period piece, right? And that's great fun, but that means a cast of a certain size, and it means you've got to have props and you've got to have costumes. So it's not something that can just be done on the drop of a hat. Like you can do Shakespeare with a bare stage and however many people you want, right? So I've seen, I think, pretty much the entire Shakespearean canon at this point in time. But I've never seen ARCADIA live.
Right. And it's set during that very specific, or at least part of it is set during that Regency period, which is a very unique and unusual era from a clothing standpoint.
Sure,
It's almost like a Carnaby Street in the 60s or something like that. If you're setting a play in the 60s on Carnaby Street, you've got to do a certain thing.
Well, because and it's in the play as well, what they wear says so much about who they are. You know, the Regency was a period of class. England has many times been about class, but class was mostly demonstrated by what you wore, and we see that in the play as well, because you have both the double class of the and you see that in the present day scenes as well, where you have landed gentry, literally. And then you have the servants, but you also have the class of age, right? You have Thomasina, who is a member of the nobility, daughter of Lady Croom, but she's a teenager, right? So there are these wonderful levels of who has power in the scene and who has status in the scene, and part of that's and what they wear.
Right, that's correct. Let's talk about who you're playing in the show, because you are not in the Regency in the 1809 to 1812 era. You are in what at the time was the present. And we have decided, because of that damned device called the cell phone and the lack thereof in this play, that it really would be very important that we keep it in the modern time frame that it was written, which is the early 90s.
There's a few things. So my character, Valentine, is a mathematician. And it's actually, I was going to talk to you about this, it's important for him that it be in the 90s, because what he talks about and what he finds incredibly beautiful is this idea of fractal geometry, of iterated algorithms. And of course, it turns out that this is a theme that appears in 1809 as well. I'm not giving you spoilers there, but these are ideas that echo back and forth across 200 years. But iterated algorithms, he says this hasn't been around for more than 20 years. Of course, they've now been around for 50 years or so. But when Valentine's character in 1994 was doing this, they were really the new sort of thing. They were they were the window into how nature works, because the way that nature works, it can be described by math. It can be described using the laws of physics. It's just a different kind of math than ballistics or classical physics.
And a kind of math that requires the ability to compute at a very rapid
to iterate,
rate.
Exactly.
And so the availability to the average person of a computer of that magnitude was just beginning to really come about in the early 90s, I think, as well. What else do we want to know about? So Valentine is one of the sons in the household, and his sister is there. And what else do we want to know about Valentine in terms of what work is Valentine doing as the play?
Well, so what's wonderful, so there's so many great things about this play, but one of the great things about this play is the way that Stoppard hides meaning and truth about the universe, about humanity, in places you wouldn't think to look at it. Ostensibly, this is a play about a garden. This is a play about landscaping, and yet it's actually a play about everything, about life and death and love and falling in love. And so ostensibly, Valentine is looking at grouse. He's looking at trying to find the equation that, when iterated, would give him the grouse that have been living and dying on his family's land for the past 200 years. He has data, and he's trying to find
because they hunt.
They had game books, so they had 200 years of data on a plate. He's trying to find the algorithm for that. It seems, on the surface, to be utterly boring. What could possibly come from that? And yet he realizes that if you know that equation, you can talk about anything. That the secrets of the universe can be described using math. It is the language that the angels speak, right? It is the way that we can actually get to the truth of things. And he sees that that is what math is. Of course, the other people in the present day are also researchers, but what they research is poetry. Lord Byron, and he never comes right out and says it, but of course, what Stoppard is showing us is that poetry and math are the same thing. They are both a way of talking about the truth of the universe, and so you have these two characters, Bernard, the researcher, and Valentine, the mathematician, who seem at odds with each other, and they get into scrapes with one another, but they're saying the same thing. And that's what's so wonderful about it. They're both fighting about the language of truth.
Yeah, but then there's the issue of the gardens, which I think is a very interesting. It feels almost like a different, as you say, Stoppard is very good at talking about different things, but meaning the same thing. And I think the debate that's going on about the whether to change the garden in the present day or to leave it as it was is an interesting. Is that right? No, it's
in the past.
It's the earlier one.
Yes,
doing the,
in
right.
1809.
Because it's capability Brown.
Exactly.
Right. That's right. That's right.
In 1809, you have in England this shift in thought from the Enlightenment to the Romantic period, coming over from Germany. You know, the Sturm und Drang movement and this idea that emotion was the big thing. And that by feeling we could get to the truth. So you had Lord Byron all about feeling and this sort of thing. And so we see that in the art, the Romantic art of the period, and the Romantic landscape architecture of the period. But of course, to have Romanticism come in, to get rid of the previous
classicism,
right? So,
which was lots of straight lines and towering artificial structures. But there's something in the play that interests me very much in that I think what Stoppard is getting at there is that you can't fake naturalism any more than you can fake classicism, right? And so we see that play out both in the garden moments of the play, the parts of the play related to the garden, but we also see it in the human interactions between particularly between Thomasina in 1809 to 12 and her tutor Septimus. And the relationship that develops there, but also I think we see it in Hannah, who is in the modern, and your partner in crime, sort of in this latter part of the play, so we see the degree to which Hannah, in a way, is trying. I think is trying to do what they were trying to do earlier with the garden, which is to hold on to an idea that wasn't organic to begin with. It was prescribed based upon travels abroad and that sort of thing. And she's trying to hold on to this idea that she's researching. And throughout the play, she's searching and searching and searching, trying to find the answer to that. And then at some point, she realizes that she's been looking for the wrong thing, not just in the wrong place, but looking for the wrong thing. Right. I think.
Well, is that no one view of the world is correct, right? The classical view on one hand and the romantic view on the other hand, the yin and the yang, that sort of thing. You have to have both of these things. They come together. They crash into each other, and when they do, you have life, right? What you really have is a dance. So that's one of the other themes here. Stoppard has so many ideas happening in this play. And I've heard the idea that he's juggling these different ideas, but what he's really doing is getting them to dance with each other. He's getting them to swirl around, and in doing so, to create something that is more than just these two things coming together. They're coming together in a certain way that reveals something else beyond even that.
Isn't he also suggesting, though, that there are some things that can't be quantified.
Oh yeah, that's literally, and that's the mathematician is the first person who says that.
Right.
That the maths are different. That there are some things that are unpredictable and cannot be predicted, no matter what. And that is something that Thomasina in 1809 also perceives.
And then lives when she gets a little bit older and starts.
Exactly. There is this. Well, again, that's the other thing is that one of the ways that poets, of course, poets being one of the major themes and characters in this play, get an idea across is with symbols and that sort of thing. So you can layer in many of these ideas using that. And of course, this whole thing takes place in the garden. And this idea of the Garden of Eden and of learning and of wisdom and what is this tree of knowledge, and the knowledge of mankind. So you have all these different layers that are there and are sort of glinting off one another. But the genius thing that Stoppard does is he just lets them be there, and then he moves it by laughter. That's, I think, the vital thing to know about this play, is it's a comedy. It's an incredibly funny comedy. So there's a movie that came out last year called Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's a hysterically funny movie. And it's similar to this in that it deals with a lot of different themes, big ideas, but the way that it does it, without getting bogged down, is it's an action movie. So there's this wonderful sleight of hand where it's talking about all these things, but it's giving it to us in the shape of an action movie. And so we can palate it. And Stoppard does the same thing. He's talking about everything, life and death and math and love and poetry, but he gives it to us as a romantic comedy. And by doing so, he lets us all in to that. You don't have to be smart to love this play and to actually walk out of this place farther than you came in. All you have to do is be human.
Right. What do you know about Stoppard, about his early life?
Not much at all.
Really, I've just read the Hermione Lee biography, which is really good. If you, of all people, should read this book, it may be the best biography I've ever read in terms of its information, but also how compellingly she presents it. One of the things that is known about Stoppard is that he was Czech originally, Czech, and that his family fled because of the Nazis, and they were Jewish, they went to Singapore and almost immediately had to flee again because of the Japanese invasion of that part of the world. And they were split up. His mother and he was on one ship, and his father was on another ship. And the father's ship never made it to India. They were torpedoed and died. And so shortly after getting to India, a year or two later, his mother married a British officer, a very conservative, upright, right wing, I think would be a reasonable term, naval officer. And essentially her attitude was the Jewish background is in the past. We're British now. And so Stoppard was in his late 30s and was at a book signing for one of his plays, and somebody walked up to him and said, "I thought you might be interested in these pictures." And it was a cousin of his, and that some of the pictures were of him as a 7-year-old boy. And he, somewhere in his mind, he knew that his family had been Jewish, but it had been so suppressed, that it really was in his late 30s when he really began. And that's when he started thinking about Leopoldstadt.
Right, exactly.
Writing that play that just won the Tony Award at the age of 83.
My word.
Yeah. But what I find interesting about that in the context of this play is that unpredictability aspect of it, if it had been able to be predicted, certainly things would have been done to stop the rise of Nazism, the war buildup, the military buildup in Japan, and getting on the boat. If those things could be predicted. And so I have a sense that Stoppard is interested in in how to take this world that must seem very unpredictable to him and try to hold it together in some way, and that almost that's what he's doing as a writer, is trying to make the world make sense in a way.
Well, or not so much to make sense, but to find the delight in the asking questions. There's a wonderful moment where, because everyone in the present day are researchers. And they're trying to, and that's the great conceit of the play.
Not all researching the same
No,
thing.
not at all. But tangential, trying to figure out in one way or the other what happened basically in this very room almost 200 years ago in 1809. And so much of the humor comes as we shuttle back and forth and we realize, oh, they got it right, or oh no, they're completely wrong. They're going, it's like watching Wile E. Coyote heading toward the edge of the cliff. It's like you know what's going to happen because you've seen the other one.
The fun is in getting there.
Yes. But there's this wonderful moment. They're researchers, and they're talking about Hannah, the female researcher in the present day, is talking about the afterlife with Valentine, and she's like, I have no interest in that at all. If the answers are all in the back of the book, I'm not interested. What's interesting is the figuring it out, is the getting there. And you see that, the delight and the joy they have in wrestling with this ultimately unpredictable world.
Well, I would also quote the great scholar Simi Kastner, my wife, who always says the artist is the last person to ask about their work. So just because Hannah says it doesn't mean necessarily that's what Stoppard's doing. But I do think that's a really good point. And I think part of the play also, and this is perhaps even more relevant in a way than anything else in the play, is just the question of can we really know those who came before? Can we ever really understand the people? And by extension, can we ever really know each other? Any other person? And I think that's, to me, the play is about that as much as it's about any of the other issues. I love Stoppard's work. The first play I ever did that I didn't write myself, as a child, was The Real Inspector Hound. And I had no idea what I was saying. I mean, I was up there on stage saying some very eloquent lines. I had no idea what the play was about or what I was doing or anything.
Well, I would say that there are people with doctors of literature who don't know what that play is about. There's so much happening there. And again, it's a comedy. That's his great genius was to say interesting and provocative things, but always while you're in the middle of a laugh, because that's when you hear it best.
Yeah, indeed. Even Leopoldstadt has some great laughs in it, believe it or not. But well, Ian, I'm looking forward to working with you as an actor. We worked together on Sunday in the Park with George.
Yes.
And was that the last time?
That was the last one. Before that was Jesus Fund, Terry Milner's play, which was also just a complete delight.
Yeah. Is Terry still around?
I know he finished up at NYU. And I don't know where they went
I think he went to Oregon, Portland, but then I think he came back here.
Yeah.
I think he may still be here, so we should look him up too.
Absolutely.
He would enjoy this play.
Yeah.
Well, Ian, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. I'm very much looking forward to working with you, and I'm looking forward. In some ways, I feel like this play is what I've been working toward all my life in a weird way.
It is. There were people back in '94 who called this Stoppard's masterpiece. Yeah. And of course, he's gone on to write Coast of Utopia and all that sort of thing. Yeah. He keeps outdoing himself. But it feels like a masterpiece sort of play.
It's going to be a joy for me to work on it while he's still alive.
Sure, absolutely.
Just to know that you're speaking the words and thinking the thoughts of these characters. I was listening to a podcast interview with Mark Rylance this afternoon while I was putting labels on things, as I often do here, and he was talking about how he believed very much in just diving in and going whole hog every moment of a rehearsal, as opposed to trying to sort of sneak up to it.
Yeah.
And so, spoiler alert for you, I am going to ask the cast to do that during the show, because I don't know how else to do this other than just to jump off the deep end and hope that your swimming lessons bear fruit.
But I mean, but what I was trying to say is that I think in order to take on a play like this, you've had to have had the swimming lessons.
Indeed.
Right. You've got to have the right team and the right backdrop, because otherwise, you could be the Moscow Art Theater. You could spend 6 months on this play and still not scratch the paintwork. You need to have gotten the muscle to then just do the thing.
We're going to do it. We're going to dive off the deep end. Ian Finley, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Our first video discussion of the year. So.
Excellent. I hope it's a great season.
Thank you.